Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm going to carry on where the Honourable Marianne Street left off in, I think, usefully characterising this bill, Sir, and locating it in an agenda that this national government has pursued for several years now through a number of different pieces of legislation. Part of an agenda to undermine and strip away regulations that are designed to both protect the natural environment in this country, to manage the trade-offs and decisions that we make as a nation, as communities, around development processes, and that guarantee the right of individuals and communities to have a say in development processes. And the rationale of this government for that whole agenda is to promote economic growth. Never mind that the RMA is built on the very notion of sustainability, and never mind that the RMA recognises that the protection of the natural environment is a higher good that we are all entrusted with for the sake of future generations. And I think Marianne Street was quite right to place this bill in the context of that very deliberate campaign over the last few years to undermine the environmental bottom lines in the RMA and to undermine the public's right to have a say. And there are now many pieces of legislation that can be characterised in that way. She was right also to point out that the government's claims about the processing times by the councils, the processing of consents under the RMA, while not perfect, is far from the kind of bogey that National have made it out to be. I suppose the thing that really irks me about this, Mr Speaker, is that the so-called business growth agenda of this government is reduced here to trimming away and undermining environmental regulation as a way of, supposedly as a way of spurring economic growth, of trading off economic growth against our natural environment. And instead of doing the hard work, instead of adopting policies that would genuinely promote innovation by New Zealand firms, that would genuinely encourage and support New Zealand firms to export and sell our ideas and our goods and services on global markets, instead of looking at ways that we can add value to an export economy that's so dominated by primary production, instead of looking at ways that we can build a modern manufacturing sector in this country that would reverse the structural imbalance that we have in the economy. Instead of doing those things, instead of seriously and proactively investing in a much more skilled workforce that would raise the productivity that we desperately need, instead of looking for all those kind of smart ways that would enable that would allow the state to enable high-value economic development, this kind of tinkering, obsessive tinkering with the RMA and weakening the protections that have been so much a part of the fabric of this country, that seems to be pretty much all we can expect from the government these days. And it's, I think, a little depressing, sir, that's what it comes down to. I want to touch on two specific parts of this bill, that is both the Auckland Unitary Plan provisions and the tree provisions. The Auckland Unitary Plan, I think, in the context of local government in this country and of planning, is a very, very significant development, in fact, an advance. It has allowed Auckland, for the first time in a generation or more, to have a serious public conversation about the future shape of the city and to tackle some of the problems that are associated with the significant population growth that Auckland continues to experience. And the unitary plan, the zone changes, dramatic changes of zoning right across the region will enable the intensification that Auckland desperately needs. Because unless that intensified urban development takes place, then there are only two other options. One is sprawling endlessly into the countryside, where low-income families, workers, are forced into cheap housing on the fringes of the city, where the costs of commuting to work every day are so prohibitive that it drives people into poverty. A completely unsustainable urban development model. Or secondly, urban containment, no intensification, and then astronomical increases in the price of land and the price of housing, which is what we currently see in Auckland. So the unitary plan offers a way out of that. It allows Auckland to go up and out and find a new development pattern, and that's extremely significant. So because of that, because it could take up to a decade to bed in the new unitary plan under the current resource management law, because the challenges, not least in affordable housing, are so acute in Auckland, we support the fast tracking of the unitary plan that is included in this bill. But there are two key elements that, again, Sir, we need to put on the record that we're disappointed that the government hasn't taken up. One is that the government has refused to allow the Auckland unitary plan to have legal weight on notification. Now, the plan will be notified in September, very shortly, and Auckland Council, as well as requesting this fast tracking of the plan, asked that the government, on a one-off basis, allow the pre-2009 RMA rules to apply. That would have made the plan have legal weight from notification. Not to be operative, but simply to have legal weight, which means that the unitary plan would be taken into account by decision makers when making consenting decisions, alongside all of the other plans and statutory considerations. If the government had just allowed that to happen, the unitary plan, with all its zoning changes and a whole raft of provisions designed to tackle affordable housing, would have taken effect almost immediately. There would have been no need for the ridiculous housing accords and special housing areas bill that the House is currently debating, and all of the armoury in the unitary plan designed to deal with managing Auckland's growth, bringing in new greenfields land, encouraging intensification. All of that would have taken effect immediately, and Auckland wouldn't have to wait another 3 years and have the national government holding back its prosperity, its development, its jobs and its growth, dealing with affordable housing. All of that could have been avoided, and it could have taken effect from September, sir. So that's a real lost opportunity. Again, I want to put on the record how disappointed we are that the government has insisted on it having the sole prerogative to appoint the hearings panel that will administer this fast-tracked process for the unitary plan. It's Auckland's plan. Aucklanders will live with the consequences. Aucklanders pay the bills. Why shouldn't the democratically elected Auckland Council at least share the responsibility for appointing the personnel on that hearings panel? We've made it very clear, sir, that we protest vigorously against this bill's putting handcuffs on councils in terms of their ability to use effective tree protection rules. This is a deliberate move by the national government to make the rules so cumbersome, to wrap councils up in red tape, to add costs to ratepayers, and make the rules so impossible and unwieldy that it will be very difficult for councils like Auckland Council to protect the urban forest in Auckland, to protect the Pahutakawa forest on the east coast of Auckland, and particularly to protect the Waitakere ranges, trees. What this bill does makes tree protection rules unworkable, or even though there have been some small improvements, We protest against that, sir, and Labour will not be supporting this bill.
Eugenie Sage.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We shouldn't be debating change.